In 1894, a strange phenomenon began affecting the people in and around the city of New Orleans. Rumors of sickness and fever, initially suspected to be another case of the dreaded yellow fever, yet it would quickly become apparent that this was something else, something different. When examining the subjects of this disease, its victims' eyes would blacken, while their mental state would decline to nothing short of degenerate, becoming prone to psychotic ramblings, debilitating paranoia, and violent outbursts of malicious anger. Yet what started off as a few individuals succumbing to this infection, it slowly turned to groups of people, and suddenly, entire families were now dying to this strange phenomenon. It didn't take long before the situation garnered the attention of the American Hunters Association, an organization that for centuries had tracked, hunted, and eradicated the otherworldly, the occult, and the paranormal. Certain that this situation was within their realm of knowledge, the director of the organization, Dr. Philip Huff Jones, opened an investigation into the evolving incident. The American Hunters Association dispatched its operatives, men and women well versed in dealing with the supernatural, searching for the source of the affliction. Yet as their investigation deepened, it became evident that this was no ordinary disease. The symptoms, the patterns, the unnatural horrors they uncovered all pointed to a far more disturbing truth. This was not a sickness of the body, but of something far darker. Deeper investigation by researchers of the organization revealed that subjects of the infection began exhibiting what could only be described as insect-like mannerisms, high sensitivity to light, preferring to linger in darkness, loss of individuality, exhibiting a strange conformity among all of the infected, as well as an eerie tendency to stay completely still, staring out into nothingness for prolonged periods of time before twitching erratically in involuntary limb convulsions. To the organization's surprise, another disturbing discovery was uncovered during an autopsy of a deceased victim, where living lava was discovered to be breathing within his bloodstream. Yet that revelation didn't seem to trouble the American Hunters Association as much as the disease's pattern. There was none. The puzzling fact was that this disease didn't seem contagious at all. It didn't spread to other people who had been in close contact with its victims, nor was it transmitted through air, droplets, or anything else. Rather, it seemed as if the victims of this infection were simply chosen at random. As the investigation began dragging out, the hunters of the AHA failed to develop a clear understanding of the evolving circumstances, and the AHA seemed to move forward purely on speculation rather than assertion. For while the pattern of the disease was obscure, maybe even subtle at best, it certainly existed, and it is certain that a more thorough investigation of the subjects of this disease would have uncovered a deeper connection. Yet the AHA's director, Dr. Huff Jones, a man who had recently assumed his father's position in the organization, was not exactly the spitting image of his predecessor, who had been a patient and calculative man. Rather, Dr. Huff Jones was a rash and assertive individual who didn't see the reason to understand and investigate, and instead sought to isolate and eradicate. In this arrogance, the AHA misread the signs, the victims, the disease, the ever-increasing swarm of insects, the tainted air, those strange growths that posed within the disease's subjects, They saw the reanimation of the dead and falsely determined on the basis of this pattern that the entity that had been plaguing New Orleans had simply been a sculptor, a lesser creature in the taxonomy of horrors they had catalogued over the many centuries of hunting the otherworldly. A minor inconvenience they simply saw as a parasite, something that carved itself into its victims and turned them into grotesque shapes. Certainly not a minor task, yet definitely not a force to be feared, and they treated it as such, a problem to be solved, a sickness to be cured. But Huff was wrong, for these symptoms of a sculptor were never the cause. They were merely fragments of another entity, the shadow of something far greater. Yet the AHA proceeded with what they deemed the solution. Despite having dealt with the entity of a sculptor in the past, the AHA decided to forego their usual methods of containment and settled on another approach for this particular incident. The reasoning for this drastic change in their method of approach is unknown, yet the consequences of their actions became apparent worldwide, as it would cause a ripple effect of apocalyptic magnitudes. In a dangerous combination of arrogant presumption, occult ignorance, and utter incompetence, the organization conducted an ancient and complex banishment ritual, hoping to put an immediate end to the sculptor's grip on the population of New Orleans. The ritual, ceremonious and vast, was performed successfully, its execution in essence flawless, yet the result of its completion would be far more of a vicious detriment than anyone could have ever imagined. For what we now have discovered in hindsight was that what the AHA had banished in this ill-conceived ritual wasn't the creature they had falsely named a sculptor. No, what they had instead accidentally banished from our realm was an entity of far greater meaning and purpose than any human could ever hope to comprehend. An entity of control, restraint, and balance. An entity that had functioned as the warden of an incomprehensible evil that had been looming in the shadows of Louisiana, and what it had left behind now in its absence was the very embodiment of eternal suffering. By the time the AHA realized their mistake, it was already too late. The obscure connection they had searched for among the victims of the outbreak unveiled itself with the ringing bells of the apocalypse. Rumors surfaced that a ship had docked in the harbor of New Orleans 10 years prior, a slave ship run by a British slave syndicate who had undertaken a dangerous journey from the Gold Coast of Africa, fueled by nothing but greed and desire. On this particular journey, the slavers had encountered dire, unforeseen consequences and had, due to the threat of thirst and starvation, decided to dump their shipment of slaves into the ocean, condemning hundreds of innocent men and women to death by drowning. It was told that this vile act of inhumanity had garnered the slavers the wrath of the gods, and as a consequence, this disease, or rather, this curse, had been following the slavers and their families for the last decade, haunting and torturing them with sickness and disease, before trapping them inside a husk of their former self, a prison of rot and decay, unable to live, but still unable to die. Truly, a fate worse than death. Yet now, with its warden banished, no longer holding the leash, this curse inflicted by this unknown entity was unchained and ran amok. The previously scattered and sporadic cases of infections around New Orleans suddenly skyrocketed, Nightmares, insanity, and violence exploded within the state of Louisiana. The few instances of death became dozens, then hundreds, the infection spiraling out of control as certain areas within the state became dead zones, dangerous, contagious, and uninhabitable. The occurrences of occult and supernatural events increased as rifts opened up on the crust of the earth, breaching and bridging the very layers of reality itself. Yet that was not all, for no longer did the disease stop at reanimating the dead, it began changing them. Horrors and monstrosities of unspeakable evil roamed the nights. Screams of incomprehensible terror tore through the swamps as the marshes turned into hellscapes. The presence of insects grew in hundredfolds, saturating the air with the swarming and buzzing of membranous wings. And it was here, far past the point of no return, that the AHA's directory, consulted by its highest-ranking researchers, finally recognized the entity they were dealing with, an Adze. This was no parasite, no lesser evil, nor was the situation now a matter of containment or eradication. The AHA realized that this problem was now endless magnitudes beyond what they had anticipated. For an Adze is not merely an evil spirit. It is a relentless entity that drifts between worlds, slipping through cracks too small for light, but wide enough for despair. Drawn in or called upon by the presence of suffering, it is a storm of misery. Like a moth to the flame, the Adze is attracted to severe agony. Its mark is seen before it is felt, a swarm of insects, insanity and violence, festering sores, and an aura of decay that swallows life itself. The Christians were quick to name it the Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub himself, the ultimate force of evil orchestrating events. But the Adze is not a creature of hell. It is a dark spirit that originates from somewhere in between the infinite layers of reality and uncertainty, an eldritch horror of inconceivable magnitudes. It is a spirit so incomprehensibly large that it exists in several planes of reality at once. It is a wretched thing birthed from filth and misery, a parasite that does not hunger so much as it devours. The Adze is no god, for gods demand worship, and gods both have and serve a purpose. The Adze is something far more simple, something far more sinister. Embodied theologically as a firefly, the Adze takes its shape in insectoid forms. It manifests itself within our realm as mosquitoes, cockroaches, hornets, flies, and anything in between. It incubates places of darkness, malice, and pain, feeding on it, feeding on the suffering while it contributes to it. By infesting, possessing, corrupting, and mutating its subjects, the Adze creates a perpetual state of a relentless feedback, inflicting decay and corruption, only to feed off of the very suffering that it itself creates. A vampire spirit that leeches the very life out of everything to sustain itself. It is a mindless entity possessing nothing but a mere childlike intelligence. It cannot be reasoned with, it cannot be swayed, and it cannot be conquered. Driven by no purpose, it does not think, it does not reason, it only is. A mindless, festering hunger that does not kill out of malice, but out of necessity. There is no method behind its creations, no logic behind their conception. They are but a sick and wicked side effect of its existence, serving no greater purpose than to inflict damage and suffering upon the Adze's subjects. There is no will behind its movements, no direction to its ruin. It is decay and corruption made manifest, feeding and growing, growing and feeding. Its suffocating presence and corrupting touch becomes ever more oppressive as it grows like a cancer, slowly engulfing the realm of mankind in darkness. The AHA realized that what they had unleashed upon the world was not simply a paranormal entity. The Adze is not just an evil spirit, it is the end of the world. Hopeless against this incredible monstrosity, the AHA sought to consult all the testimonies written by hunters now long gone, looking for answers on how to stem the impending tides of the apocalypse. And there, somewhere deep within their old and forgotten records, a single tome may have held the answer, the key to saving mankind. The entity could not be confronted head-on, as it did not physically exist within our realm. Rather, its presence within reality had to be weakened. The tome revealed a crucial truth. For each time the Adze took hold of one of its emissaries, it siphoned a fraction of its own strength. When that emissary was slain and banished, the Adze was forced to expend its dwindling essence to restore what was lost. This proved that the entity was not invincible, it was merely insatiable. Within Louisiana, where its influence was strongest, the AHA also uncovered something else. Rifts. Unstable wounds in reality from where horrors spilled forth, mindless extensions of the entity's hunger. Yet these rifts proved to be impassable. No hunter, no researcher, not even the damned souls of the organization could step through them. The Adze itself barred the way, its immense presence and impenetrable force keeping the gateway sealed. However, if enough emissaries were purged from our realm, if enough of its vessels were shattered, the Adze would be left vulnerable. With its hold of our realm diminished, the rifts would open, and beyond them, in that wretched place the researchers had named the Shade, the Adze itself would take physical form, a thing of flesh, of rot and unspeakable ruin. Only there, in its one true moment of weakness, could this incomprehensible horror finally be slain. But now the AHA had to ask themselves, which among them would be either brave or insane enough to commit to such a task. Hey there, Hazmat here. This was the original idea for the Sculptor, or rather what the original development team referred to as the Adze, which is a being that originates from the folklore of Ghana. I have left a link to its Wikipedia page below if you're interested in reading more about that particular entity. Now I just want to emphasize before everyone gets up in arms that this particular Adze is an amalgamation of several different spirits and supernatural beings, a creature that was specifically tailored for the setting of Hunt. So it is not the literal Adze from the folklore, it is merely inspired by it. As always, a big thanks goes out to the Hunters Lounge, specifically the exclusive Gitchy Boy, the exclusive Johnny Sevens, the exclusive War Monk, and the exclusive Rat. The VIPs, Corvo Bearslayer, Derivative, Doc Powell, Gino Lucero, Goose, Hambone, Jiminal Bob, Corey Peterson, Michael Thornhill, More Death Menace, Hein, Slip, Stas Piestek, Sunrise Phoenix, TJ Crane, Texas Toast, and the Wizard of Copper. And of course, all the regulars. If you want to support me in the channel, consider signing up as a member, either here on YouTube or on Patreon, for as little as $1 a month. Link is in the description below. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.